Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this session, talking about ASM and how to grow the market. We have a great lineup of people today. I'm going to give a brief introduction to the biographies, doing it in the order of the speakers. Kicking off for us is going to be Christophe Nicolet. He's Managing Director at Précinox. It's based in La Chaux-de-Fonds, Switzerland. Before joining the Précinox group, Christophe held several top management positions, including at the Swatch Group in Southeast Asia and in Switzerland. He's going to be followed by Marcin Piersiak, who's the Director of the European chapter of the Alliance for Responsible Mining, which is otherwise known as ARM, which is a global NGO headquartered in Colombia that champions a vision of legitimate, responsible, and profitable artisanal and small-scale mining. After that, Joanne Lebert, good friend, my former boss, also the Executive Director of Impact, which is an Ottawa-based organization that works to improve how natural resources are managed where security and human rights are at risk. And finally, we are going to have Dr. Gavin Hilson, who is the Professor and Chair of Sustainability in Business at the Surrey Business School, University of Surrey. He is a leading global authority on the environmental and social impacts of ASM in sub-Saharan Africa and has published widely, including over 350 journal articles, book chapters, and reports on this subject. Just to give a bit of an introduction to this topic, I think it's fair to say that the artisanal gold sector has both a PR and a marketing problem. Despite employing over 15 million miners, producing approximately between 15 and 20% of the world's annual gold production, we see less than 1% of that production coming through LBMA refiners. As with this morning's workshop, some of whom you were here for that this morning, the purpose of this panel is to open a conversation about how we can change the dynamic and reimagine ASM going forward. Is it a question of finding ways to de-risk ASM material for LBMA refiners, or is it about refiners adjusting their risk tolerance and working to mentor and mitigate sourcing challenges? Or is industry and governments, both donors and producer nations, also needing to see this through a development lens rather than a risk lens? What needs to be done differently? Are due diligence and audit frameworks like the Responsible Gold Guidance too unrealistic? Are we setting too unrealistic expectations and demands on ASM? What role can big miners and NGOs play to help this material gain legitimate market access to LBMA refiners? You know, yesterday, Paul Fisher made a point that we should be seeing ESG mitigation not as a cost, but rather an investment in the future. And I think the same argument could and should be applied to ASM. So I'm going to pass over to Christophe. He's going to focus on two questions. Some of them are like, what drives Précinox current customers to engage in the ASM sector, and how the company plans to grow future demand for ASM. Marcin will follow and give a sense of ARM's work building the responsible ASM sector. Joanne will speak about some of the lessons learned in creating the first legal traceable export of ASM material from DRC and more recently Côte d'Ivoire. And finally, Gavin will raise some of the challenges and realities found in purchasing gold in Africa's sector, ASM sector. So I'll pass it over to you, Christophe, and we'll have a conversation afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us. We are a very small refiner located since almost 50 years in the middle of the heart of the Watch Valley in Switzerland. And we have the privilege of having contact with almost 200 customers from the watch industry as a monthly basis. So today I'm going to convey their voice. And I have some good news, by the way. So I'm really keen to share this with you. So what are their current preoccupations of these customers and their future needs, and when it comes to ASM supply? So on this diagram, it shows the global supply. Yeah? We all know these numbers. Between 2020 and 2021, our current customers increased their purchase for ASM Gold through our company by 100%. So they doubled their purchase to our company for ASM Gold. And looking at the annual LBMA data during the same period, we can see a 16% drop. So how can we explain this? I have the privilege of listening the customers' needs, and this is once again what I would like to share with you. So what drives our customers to engage in ASM Gold? By the way, we can see the number of tons which have been declared in 2021, and it's less than 1% globally, but if we are talking about only artisanal mining, it's around 4%. So this diagram shows the global annual demand for the gold, and you may know that half of these 4,000 tons per year are going through Switzerland. So it means the statement of these customers coming from the watch industry on the left and from the bank and investment on the right, it's quite important for our business. Huh? And so you can read some few statements of our customers engaged with ASM. So all of them, they are buying today ASM Gold from Précinox. So yesterday we heard from Raiffeisen that they engage to ASM initiative together with SBGA. On the top here, on the right side, you can see a statement, you can read a statement from the Banque Cantonale Vaudoise, who just launched a new product, which includes a new fund, which includes 20% of PX Impact Gold, ASM Gold in this product. So this is also a good news, and it starts this year. So you have all different statements. The one here, it's coming from, at the bottom, from pension funds who just started to sell our gold. So if we try to see, the main purpose here is transparency, traceability, sustainability, and social impact. They all talk and they all speak about that. So these are the main drivers, and of course also the main concern for all our stakeholders for sourcing ASM Gold. So is there a change in the mindset of our customers? Today, when I talk to our clients, I can feel a real willingness to commit even more to the path of ASM sourcing. And really, they are coming and they are asking solutions to engage more. So there is a demand, and we know their concern. So what shall we do to offer a meaningful solution to meet this demand? Since 5 years now, we have implemented a supply chain in Peru together with a Canadian partner. So we have a processing plant which has been built directly at the place where the miners are mining. The processing plant has currently a capacity of 150,000 tons per year of ore. A few hundred miners are bringing the ore directly to the process plant. They can monitor the assay, and they are paid by bank transfer. They can get paid for around 80% of the gold contained in the ore. They earn more money than using mercury on site with a recovery rate around 40 to 50%. So the processing plant produces the ore, which is sent directly to Précinox as a weekly basis. So every week, we are receiving a doré from the processing plant. Of course, the processing plant shall have a high degree of traceability, transparency. The standards are, and the supply chain are audited every 6 months by external parties with the aim of constant improvements. To offer total transparency, we published an ESG report for the processing plant using GRI standards, and this is for benchmark purpose. And we build the trust, because the trust is important in this business, with our partner Dynacor and Vetadorada in Peru. And we are also developing a transparent approach with the NGO. We talk about NGO this morning. Each time I receive an email from someone from an NGO, I answer straight away and I invite them to come to our factory and to visit the factory so we can explain with transparency what we are doing and what we can do together to improve the situation. So by implementing this way of working, we managed to have a smooth and constant supply. And the volume are matching with our industrial needs. And this is very, very important because for this business to grow, we need volumes. And you can see we are producing 4 to 6 tons of fine gold per supply chain. We are producing semi-finished product for the watch industry. To produce a semi-finished product, you need much more gold than what you are delivering. So as an example, if I have to deliver a watch case in gold, 20 grams, I need 100 grams within the production to produce this case because you have to stamp, you have to remove chips. So the first ton who arrived in our factory, I can only use or sell 200 kilograms. The 800 kilograms remain forever in the factory to produce the gold which is then delivered to customers. And this is very important. We need volumes to sustain the demands. Yeah. And this is fully scalable. We develop this supply chain and we can transfer this supply chain to other places in Peru or to other countries. So now to end my presentation, I would like to talk 2 minutes or 1 more minute on how to grow this demand. And yesterday we talked about CO2 footprint, and we have the answer here. From LSM to produce 1 kilogram of fine gold, the impact is 30,000 greenhouse gas equivalent. For the recycled gold, the sources are limited. So we need an alternative for both. And the alternative is ASM, and we believe in this because we have in ASM, according to our calculation, only 3,000 kilograms of greenhouse gold per kilograms of gold produced. So it may be the preferred alternative. It is for our customers who are asking more, and it has a huge impact on the millions of miners working every day in the mines. Thank you.
Thank you, Christophe. Very too much. Thank you.
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. Hello, good afternoon. So I have a pleasure and a difficult task to be the last-minute replacement of my colleague from the board, Patrick Shane, a French refiner with a lot of experience, 30 years of experience with sourcing from ASM. And I'd like to incorporate some of his ideas and my experience of 12 years in ARM and retell a little bit the story of an initiative that started 15 years ago and kind of evolved in the process. And really the demand that we're talking about in this session is an important part of this story. So starting with some of Patrick's memories 20 years ago, I was around in the space. ASM was pretty much informal. It was getting to the supply chains, but no one was really asking much questions. Going back 15 years ago, we have a pioneering initiative called Oro Verde, Green Gold, appearing in Colombia. And this was the first test of trying to have a traceable supply chain from Afro-Colombian artisanal miners to the jewelry. And it seemed like a good idea, and ARM started working around it to develop a standard that could actually help scale it up and see how this could be applicable to other places, to other types of mining, other geographies. So part of it was a a very robust multi-stakeholder discussion to find out what is responsible ASM, what is fair, and so on and so on. So in the face of this informality, the premium of 10% of value was set. So 10 years ago, it was more or less $4,000. And we have tried over the years, so the premium as an incentive to continue improving, but at the same time to really cover the costs of formalization. Fair Mines strive to honor this original deal with the miners. At the moment, the premium stays at 4%, but with changes of prices, it's around 6.5% of current gold prices. So it's been a learning and awareness raising process with jewelers. So we mostly worked with the jewelry sector, but also mints like Monnaie de Paris and some other mints in Europe, banking sector starting there, and even medical gold sector. So with some interesting experiments as well. And today we have around 400 businesses in 35 countries that are part of Fair Mines. And they integrate, this proposition of value of traceability, product provenance claims, third-party audits, and robust long-term investment in the ASM. In terms of sales, talking about demand, we have sold so far, so not we, the miners supported by the program, have sold 1.6 tons of Fair Mine gold, generating over $6 million of funds to invest in mine improvements, in communities, and so on. And the demand peaked at around 400 kilos in 2019, so the year before the pandemic, and it slumped to around 100 and something kilos in 2022, also due to the existence at this moment of other alternatives of ASM gold on the market, offering lower incentives to the miners. On the other side of the scale, so we're talking on the kind of the top best practice standards. On the other side of the scale, at an entry level, the OECD due diligence guidance was an important factor shaping the demand for ASM. And we know that the emergence of the guidance came with a strong message of promoting the engagement with ASM while mitigating the risks. Unfortunately, most companies still thought it was too complex and risky, especially in Africa, because of systemic issues, weak infrastructure for ASM legality formalization. It has proven to be difficult to satisfy this basic process. At the same time, standards developed by the industry did not put that much emphasis at the time on ASM, so maybe additional efforts can now be made to help the few brave ones who are engaging with the sector to share the risks and have a safer environment to do it. As a part of dialogue to reach a common understanding of the implementation of the guidance in the context of ASM and also facilitate commercial engagement, ARM and Resolve have developed the Craft Code. It's an open source standard that tries to make the due diligence more concrete and empower miners in the process. So these were the kind of two ends that we've been trying to work on, obviously thinking about finding customers for the gold and trying to bridge these gaps. We have now come up with a value proposition that is called Sustainable Mines Program. So it's a kind of progressive improvement sourcing proposition based on collaboration and kind of inviting everyone in the space between the industry, the NGOs that we collaborate with, governments and other stakeholders, to have this stepwise approach. We still think that it's important to keep the ambitions high, and I think this leadership that is there with Fair Mines certified mines has been an inspiration, for a generation of miners now, but obviously are also at the moment already facilitating sales of the gold at lower levels based on the craft codes. So I don't want to get into much of the detail of this. I'm happy to talk about it, but we think that you need different approaches at different levels of kind of that fit really the context, the position in which the ASM finds itself and adjust to this. I think the message is that without some kind of incentives, without support to the sector, not much is going to happen. So I think it's about finding solutions how we can do it together. In terms of this how we perceive the evolution, many brands with whom we collaborated now understand that sustainability is a process, and while you want to encourage best practice, you also need to work on this lower level of the pyramid if you want to get there at some point. So we can't lose the process from our view. And the current panorama, are we at the tipping point? So we think that in the beginning, the process was really driven by, a small activist jewelers, kind of really vocal. But in recent years, we have really seen some mainstream adoption with a handful of luxury brands that have officially incorporated ASM into their supply chains. So, we've mentioned at some point also that the discussions of sustainability are becoming more mature, more diverse, analyzing the wider context. And I think, that's something that we always, put on the table. The narrative on recycled gold, 100% being the sustainable solution, we consider that it's not really, we're not making the effort we should be making. So basically, the mining, will continue, and if the LBMA refiners don't buy ASM gold, someone else will, without caring for social or environmental consequences. So to conclude, I think the main point of this reflection is that if you're really serious about sustainability and you want to have a wider and sophisticated approach to it, you have no choice but integrate in some way, work, engage with ASM. It's simply the most material issue for the sector in terms of social, but also, with a great potential for environmental improvement, and we can't pretend it's not there. The important thing here is that we as an industry change the narrative and really stop thinking about it as a liability, stop thinking that it's shameful, you want to hide it away if you have it, but go the opposite way. Think about the opportunities it brings in terms of showing off, the projects, the impacts that you can make by engaging ASM, supporting them, being transparent about the challenges, but also showing to the public and educating the public that the progressive changes that can be made are really, really important. So I think it's taking it from risks to opportunities, and in a way, it was interesting to hear in the morning, the argument about wealth transfer from the poorest to the rich, and I think the luxury industry, in a way, is a greatest example of how such a wealth transfer and can be made. And I think there's a great opportunity to show beautiful stories, to show what changes we are collectively making, and really put a human face of the industry to the public. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcin. Thank you. Sure, Joanne, you can sit there if you like. Oh, sure, I'll bring it to you.
Thank you.
No worries.
Great, thanks. Okay. Great. Thank you, Ellen. Hi, everyone. I'm going to skip through a few slides rather quickly. I hope I don't give you whiplash, but I have a very limited amount of time. So I'm going to stick to some key points and key messages. If you have any questions about any of the content of the slides, I can certainly answer them in the discussion period. So I want to focus a little bit on perception. essentially changing the narrative. So I want to challenge a bit the perception of ASM with one slide. Talk about purpose, which we heard a lot about earlier today, especially with regards to impact monitoring and knowing whether or not we're doing good and not just avoiding risk. And then I want to come to recommendations both to LBMA and the World Gold Council, if I may.
That's why you're here.
All right, great. So a receptive audience, I hope.
Yeah.
So this is the potential. We carried out extensive research with a number of academics in Africa's Great Lakes region and West Africa, and what became quite shocking, stark to us, is that this is also the face of ASM. We always think of a miner deep in a pit, that sort of thing, but we have learned that women consistently earn more in mine sites than outside of mine sites, like outside of mining, in the DRC, Congo, Uganda, and Rwanda. In Rwanda, that's true for 30%. Let me just say, that's 30% more lucrative for men in mining. For women in Rwanda, it's 223% more lucrative. In Uganda, it's 335% more lucrative for women in the mining sector, artisanal mining sector, than any other sector. This is the face of ASM, and this is the potential that we are missing. So Impact has had the Just Gold project operational in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Ivory Coast, and soon in Uganda, and we've been doing this for about 10 years now. It is an incentive-based approach. It's very important to understand that artisanal mining happens in an ecosystem. If we expect them to meet certain standards or to change the way they do business, we have to understand what's going to motivate them. And what are we putting on the table that will allow them to essentially shift from illicit, informal to formal. So we have been testing incentive-based approach to traceability and due diligence for artisanal mining in DRC and Ivory Coast called the Just Gold project. Some of the incentives we've tested over the years are listed there, but really what is quite important is around better pricing, of course, pricing transparency, understanding how the price of gold is calculated, how it links to the informal market, as well as being paid cash where they mine. Because one of the things we've done in DRC that was extremely surprisingly maybe motivating was the entire economy functions where gold is currency. So swapping out gold for cash at the mine site where people can put cash in their pockets and not be essentially cheated by miners, or when you're buying something with gold and you don't know the value of it. So that sort of assurance at the mine site and being paid out in cash was absolutely critical. So that's included in pricing transparency as a key motivator. So in the DRC, in a period of about 2 years, over 24 kilos of responsible artisanal gold reached the international market. It's not a lot, but it's proof of concept and proof that full traceability, supply chain due diligence is possible. But since 2018, we've stopped focusing on responsible sourcing because we needed to clearly focus on the enabling conditions in DRC, which just aren't there. And specifically around fiscal and administrative reform, because the price of gold is so high that responsibly sourced gold from the Congo is actually not commercially viable. So we need to work on those fundamental issues, and we need the opportunities to work on those issues for a protracted period of time in order to eventually support those miners to reach the international market. And we've provided, along with the gold, the 24 kilo data on ESG SDGs, and I'll come to that in a second. And that, by the way, is the jeweler that bought some of the gold and produced beautiful rings in Toronto. Similar project in Ivory Coast, a more recent one, where we've engaged with LBMA-listed refiners with an ASM cooperative. We've had some test shipments to Europe. One of the key milestones I'm particularly proud of, if we go back to that first slide, is more than a quarter of the cooperative's decision-making positions are now occupied by women. So from 0% to 26% in 2 years, with a dedicated committee and action plan to improve gender equality, among other things. I could talk about environmental mitigation, that committee, et cetera. There's a lot of great work being done by the local cooperative. I'm not going to talk about the business model so much, but what I want to say is a major barrier in that case, because I will talk about it in the recommendations, is that, again, that offers full data on the supply chain with very clear SDG, ESG impacts on the ground. The major barrier is the cooperative's mining permit has not been renewed. It was submitted 2 years ago, and it's caught up in, the bureaucracy, but the government acknowledges that the mining cooperative is legitimate. They just don't have their piece of paper. But the market and the consumer are nervous. So nobody is buying that gold, just for lack of that piece of paper. So we consider them legitimate, even though they're not legal, but the market is not buying that gold. So all those positive impacts are now essentially, I would say, almost going to waste, or it's a missed opportunity. This is an example of the type of data we collect. It can be presented like in more kind of a, I would say, almost a two-dimensional, maybe flat kind of social science sort of way, where we just present the facts over time, longitudinally, with regards to food insecurity. So this is just one example of the type of data we collect. And if you see the bright orange and the red, that's decreasing food insecurity over time. This is essentially eating less than one meal a day. That's the very red bottom. And there's been improvements. There was a slight spike because of Ebola in the DRC, but it was consistently going down. So this is the type of data that can accompany the gold from a place like the DRC. And now we're getting more sophisticated, where we actually use, we're an NGO that works in the development sector. We're experts on monitoring and evaluation. So we use globally validated indexes by the development sector to measure the SDGs. And essentially, we've taken those indexes and adapted them to ASM. And that allows us to essentially measure SDGs holistically. We just don't pick your favorite SDG. They work together. So measuring those things holistically in order to provide reports and analytics, knowing whether or not we're making a difference on the ground. Now, so how to grow demand in the supply of ASM material as well? First of all, why engage in a conflict-affected area? Well, I think it's been already spoken many times before, like many times today, where it enters the secondary market anyways. And in many ways, it ends up in our supply chain. So we do need to focus on those, let's say, weakest parts of the supply chain. You're only as strong as your weakest link, and we need the investment to improve conditions in places like the ones we work in. Context matters. It's been said as well that the same solution doesn't apply to every context. Not all conflict-affected areas are the same, and I gave you the example of what we're doing now in the DRC because of the context there, that it's important for us to create and support those enabling conditions before going whole hog and essentially focusing on bringing that gold to market, or on the various steps of the OECD guidance, including policies, company policies, et cetera. So essentially a stepwise approach, but really focusing on that enabling environment first. So the challenges typical of these conflict-affected areas in Africa, I've mentioned them already. Infrastructure poor, governance poor. Gold is expensive in a place like Congo. Logistics, infrastructure, transport, extremely expensive. It takes a long time to export a product, especially in ASM. As well, taxes, fiscality can be a challenge, again, especially in DRC. Inefficient bureaucracies, again, I gave the example of the permit in Côte d'Ivoire, where we consider, and even the government considers, that actors to be legitimate, but there's no willing buyer as a result. And as was mentioned by Marcin, ASM already has a market. We have to put something on the table that's actually enticing. They have a market, changing their entire ecosystem or their business plan in order to satisfy externally imposed standards for a market that may or may not engage is a big risk. We talk about risk downstream, but risk upstream is real as well. And this is my last slide. So 3 immediate things that perhaps the LBMA and the World Gold Council could do to contribute to scale, because we all have been involved in initiatives, but growing them and scaling them is really the challenge. LSM and logistics, or carriers, providing for transport and facilitating the export of segregated ASM material to the international market. Again, to bring the cost of that gold down in order for it to be more competitive, especially against the illegal market. Provide clear guidance as to what constitutes legitimate ASM. The case I keep bringing up in Côte d'Ivoire is a perfect one, and that occurs a lot. There's a lot more flexibility, say, in 3Ts, the 3T sector, where there's a very limited supply, but gold is ubiquitous, and so we seem to be sticking to very rigid interpretations of the OECD guidance and preferring legal over legitimate. And of course, models of engagement for different country contexts or along that conflict-affected or continuum. As well, coordination with donors and financial institutions to get at systemic issues. I think the Swiss Better Gold Initiative, if there was such a fund for Africa, would be very positive and important. Startup financing, inventory financing, motivating those local exporters and traders. We need them inside the supply chain because they know how to do business efficiently. And finally, the squeeze on large known international or transnational traders working with enforcement agencies. And that's it.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you.
And thank you for keeping to time. Sorry to do this to you. Please, Gavin.
Okay. Maybe it's... Okay, so I'm going to share a perspective on what things look like on the ground. So, how I see it. People are scared of ASM. Why? I mean, no one's going to get hurt, so I don't know why people are scared. I think it's common knowledge that the OECD standard is very stringent, and over 99% of miners in sub-Saharan Africa are excluded from these stringent standards. The reality is you can't de-risk something that cannot be de-risked fully. That's the reality. Okay, you're going to have to meet these miners halfway, at least in the immediate term. No more half-baked solutions. Okay, partnering with large-scale mining companies, that may work today, but it's not an effective long-term solution. Government partnerships, yep, governments are important, but we have to recognize that these governments are more interested in large-scale mining, and you may not get the help you're looking for. The donor funding is there. If there is a silver lining, the donor funding is there, and the support is available for small-scale mining in sub-Saharan Africa. It's just tweaking it a bit and figuring out where to use it most effectively. The problem is that ASM formalization is deprioritized across the region, and the policy architecture tends to fuel informality. So, exorbitant licensing costs, bureaucracies, very little land available to register operations, et cetera. It's all about, heard this a lot today, about changing the narrative, changing the mindset, giving ASM more positive visibility. Let's talk about it as more of a development issue and less as a mining issue, okay? And making sure that at international workshops and conferences that they have representation, and not like the 2 or 3 affluent miners that we see in particular countries, but people who are really at the bottom of the food chain. Okay, some truths. So when you take a networks approach and you do a quick scan of sites, you realize quickly that that we're talking about an ecosystem here. It's more than just the miners. So if you focus on ASM, individuals or groups, we have their dependents, okay? And we also have the equipment suppliers. We also have buyers and financiers. We also have people involved in transport, getting people to site. We also have other industries, food providers, other suppliers, people who have invested in hotels, accommodation. And these ecosystems are characterized by unique power structures, or have unique power structures. These relationships that they have are firmly embedded. They have different perceptions of value than we have, okay? A lot of it is based on trust, okay? So it's important that we don't silo the miners when we're looking at this issue. It's important that we take into account this ecosystem and the relationships between these different actors, okay? Let's zero in on the ASM miners themselves, the individuals or the groups. Think of these groups or these populations as a classroom. Everyone in the classroom is different. Everyone has a different ethnicity. Everyone's from a different background, different educational level, has different aspirations. So when you take this into account, it becomes very easy, I guess, to segregate different groups of miners. So at the one extreme, this is the typology we generally use. You have those who are driven by poverty, and you have those who see it more as an opportunity, okay? So necessity entrepreneurship versus opportunity-based entrepreneurship, okay? So you have an eclectic group of people in there. You have people who are farming, who are doing this seasonally. You have former public sector workers who have a degree. You have people who've worked in the mining sector, the large-scale mining sector, who have skills like a blast certificate or who have used equipment. You have other people who have worked in the manufacturing sector. So it's an eclectic group of people. So you have to make sure that the solutions you implement are equally dynamic. There's now the issue of time that we have to take into account. So we've often looked at some of these miners as being caught in a poverty trap. But then you see people who are driven to the sector because of poverty, having navigated some of the very difficult issues they need to navigate, and somehow emerged at the end of the tunnel in a position to reinvest or invest elsewhere. So these are people who, their trajectory is the same. They've jumped into mining because of poverty, but they've somehow managed to navigate very difficult circumstances and invest and branch out, and now we're in a very fairly decent position financially. So it's also about catering to their needs, okay? We call this third narrative a platform for wealth creation. These aren't criminals. These aren't barbarians, okay? They're not insane. They're just ordinary people like us. They want to earn money to invest. They want to put their kids in school. And I think the quicker we sort of accept this, the quicker we'll be able to arrive at practical solutions, okay? Thinking like this is very helpful. So let's just quickly look at what it looks like in this world, okay? Our world versus their world. Let's look at a few things when it comes to buying or diagnosing what's going on in this sector, okay? We're condemning these middlemen. Oh, they're ripping them off, okay? But in an informal sector, they're indispensable. They can't access banks. They can't access formal support. So these middlemen become indispensable in their world. We're condemning them because they're destroying the environment. In the most extreme of cases, these are poverty-driven operators who are looking to buy bread at the end of the day. The environment is the last thing on their minds, okay? Child labor. In Africa, children are an indispensable part of the household production system, okay? Price. We seem to think we're going to lure these people or attract these people by giving them a better price for their gold. No, relationships matter much more to them, okay? They don't trust governments. They don't trust anyone. They trust themselves. They trust the people in their communities. We seem to think that they need markets. They already have markets. They're already selling gold. So these are the things that we need to accept. So if you're trying to come up with a solution, a buying strategy, these are the things you need to think about, okay? So what is it you're offering? That's what you got to think about. Building on Joanne's point, context matters, okay? Let's take a look at ECOWAS, okay? We seem to think that small-scale mining is the same from country to country. If you look at Mali, for example, it's pretty much confined to the traditional economy. You look at Ghana, you have a very, don't want to say effective, but you have a system in place where you're either legal or illegal. Okay? In Liberia, all the gold's being smuggled out of the country, and they seem to be fine with that. In Sierra Leone, the policy apparatus for ASM has been designed with diamonds in mind. So you have this apparatus that's being implemented for gold, but it's pretty much for diamond mining. So you have different things going on in different countries, neighboring countries, even within countries. Let's take a look at Ghana quickly, where I do work, a lot of my work. In Tarkwa, you have, which is in the south of Ghana, you have what we call the pit owners, who are responsible for handling mercury and amalgamating gold. In Talansi in the north, it's the gold buyers that do that. In Kobrisu, which is in the eastern region, the chiefs are more involved. So you can't go into this dynamic, this situation, assuming that everything is the same. And I think we're all guilty of doing that. So if you are serious, where's the cash? Okay? Honestly, what reports are you relying on? I'm not going to name drop. I'm not going to single out any reports, but some of the reports I've been reading recently, well, some of the reports I've read, you're just wondering what mines they visited. So choose a country and figure it out. Okay, that's my advice. Choose a country and figure it out, because it differs from place to place. Have a general blueprint, but tweak it according to the context that you're, the country that you're interested in. Okay, try and understand why things are informal or quasi-formal. Okay, what keeps this sector informal? Because that's the big barrier. We always say, oh, we can't go there because they don't have a license. Oh, they're not formal. Well, try to understand why they're not formal, why they haven't been able to formalize, okay? And that's how you can go about supporting these operators. Adapt, do not adopt. We heard this morning about the Latin American model, very successful. Well, you cannot adopt this thing wholesale in sub-Saharan Africa. It's a completely different context, okay? Have your responses ready. We heard about the example of Côte d'Ivoire, where there's no license. Well, that's fairly representative across sub-Saharan Africa. You have people who have been issued smelting and refining licenses in Tanzania. The government knows they're buying from people who are just rocking up from anywhere. So in their minds, that's legal, that's traceable. But in our minds, no, because They can't provide any detail about where that ore has come from. So you have to be flexible and you have to have your responses ready. Okay? If someone comes up and says, well, you're buying ore from someone who's bought ore from a family where there's children working at the site, well, you have to have your responses ready. No more lazy policy and lazy solutions, okay? No more excuses and no more fantasies. The large-scale mining sector, okay, yes, it can help us in the short term, but it's not the answer. They shouldn't even be in the room. And I'm not saying that because I don't like them. I'm saying that because they shouldn't be in the room. Large-scale miners and small-scale miners are mining different deposits, okay? They can coexist, and they can coexist in harmony if we sort this dynamic out, okay? No large-scale miner has signed up to help small-scale miners, okay? What are the immediate solutions, short-term solutions? Maybe going into a situation with a view towards implementing a more vertically integrated apparatus, getting more involved in what goes on at the site, monitoring things from there. Maybe companies that are interested in buying gold can do that, have more of a presence at the site. And also thinking about formalization more dynamically and more constructively. You see in some countries like Ghana, for example, they have this community mining scheme. This could be a platform, okay? You have in Mali these corridors that have been created. I know some of the large-scale mining companies have been involved in promoting that. So maybe this is a starting point, getting involved and trying to figure out how we can launch these initiatives in some of these countries, taking into account or taking advantage of some of the architecture that's in place. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Gavin. I'm very cognizant of time and the fact that you have to run to a train in 15 minutes, so it's unfortunate that we only have 15 minutes to take questions and really discuss some of these some really interesting things that came out of these presentations. I'm going to take the liberty of asking one question, and I think it comes, I'm going to pick on Joanne first. This issue of the legal versus the legitimate, I think, is a really good question, and I think it's something that, you rightly point out how LBMA and I think the OECD, who both cite that explicitly in the guidance document and the goal guidance. What do you think? How do you think we should define legitimate? I mean, what added context do you think we should add to the responsible goal guidance, for example, to give that clarity?
Well, I do, like I said, I do think there needs to be very explicit, concrete examples that should be considered acceptable. Mm-hmm. The one I gave is I think, quite clear. I mean, and we have this, not unique to gold. It's, we work in 3Ts, we work in cobalt, we work in other sectors. And this issue of artisanal miners who do everything they possibly can the right way, make all their payments, can only go so far because the government hasn't done what it needs to do. And that might be willingly or not. It might be the bureaucracy that's slow, and that is always where things fall, well, one of the reasons things fall down in terms of engagement, but that's not the miner's fault. Mm-hmm. So I think if there was a very clear guide, I don't want to use the word guidance because guidance is everywhere, but a FAQ or something that is public and essentially has the buyer's backs, that if you engage at this time under these conditions, it's totally fine, even if you don't have your piece of paper from the government, mm-hmm. which, by the way, can also be fraudulent. Yeah. So we're over-relying on paper and legality when that's just not the way things work, and it doesn't mean people are good or bad or something's corrupt or not necessarily. So that flexibility is the kind of adaptation that we need. But that can be documented. We have many examples of scenarios that can be presented as, these are okay.
Well, please share those with us. I'm just going to take a few questions from the floor. I see some on the screen here. One for you, Christophe. How do you control the provenance of the ore to the processing plant, and how do you control the ESG conditions at the artisanal mines?
Yeah, this is a big issue because as a refiner located in Switzerland, definitely you cannot go and control hundreds of miners. But you need these miners to bring the volumes. So this is why you have to have on-site, on the field, very strong relationship with a company, and we have these relationships with Veta Dorada and Dynacor in Canada. And for each single transaction, they make control, they go on site, we send our NGO to control at the mine site. We have an external auditing company who check the ESG auditing within the full supply chain. And it's a daily job. For each single transaction, we have to check. But at the end, we know there is a risk. There is a risk because you need hundreds or thousands of miners to bring these volumes. And we need volumes to change the momentum. Our customers are willing to take this risk together with us, but they ask for transparency. If there is something goes wrong, we have to explain to them, to bring them to the site and to show in full transparency. But we need that to start from kilograms to 10 kilograms to 100, and we need tons. And we are not talking about kilograms, we need tons to change something. So we know there is risk involved, but we improve day after day by full transparency and traceability. And of course, we start to experiment some new powerful tools using blockchain, using other way of ensuring the traceability up to the mines. And this is something which will come during the next few months.
Well, I wonder, I mean, this issue of risk, I mean, it was one that what Gavin mentioned, and I think you're rightly pointing out, or said elsewhere, Gavin, about how the risk goes both ways. I mean, there's risk to the refiner, to their GDL status if something goes wrong, but maybe you can give us a sense of like what that risk is like, you know, from a miner's perspective, where they've engaged and things haven't gone right. And I think also just to you as well, Christophe, I mean, what was it in, like, how did Précinox come to that position where it decided to take that engagement with that risk? I don't know who wants to go first on that.
Oh, that was for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first question is to you, Gavin. I mean, about like, how do you, what's the risk from the other side, from the ASM perspective?
Well, I mean, these people live in these communities, so obviously they have relationships with these buyers. They have relationships with these people who we're labeling as unscrupulous, and yeah, you know, if all of a sudden they're severing these relationships, then it can have serious repercussions. I mean, you know, for them and their families, you know, access to other resources and other opportunities, like local schools, local education. Like, we have to think beyond the mine site.
Yeah.
And that's what they're thinking of. And I think the best way to go about doing this is to provide or to make available options for these people. You know, like, don't force feed them anything or to force them to do anything. You just need to provide them with opportunities and provide them with choices, and then some of them will jump on board, and some of them won't, or some of them will see others succeeding, and they'll be able to sort of sever these relationships that they have with existing stakeholders over time.
Yeah,
that's right. We have to offer to them an alternative, and today they get more money at bringing their ore to Veta Dorada because they're getting, I mean, for 80%.
It's almost like double the
double,
yields.
yeah. Of course, they have to pay taxes a bit. But at the end, we are selling these golds, and we are taking a small premium, and we are reinvesting this premium through our NGO Fidamar. And we are not giving this money back to the miners. We are giving this money back to the community, so to the children. To the wife who stay at home.
And the communities are the ones that decide how to spend that money, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So when they come home, they have an incentive of, it's better to bring the ore there because we can see the difference.
Yeah.
Not for me, because it's always better to give $1 more to the wife than to the miners. You know that?
Yeah.
So it's better.
Yeah.
It really,
I mean, there's been discussions again this morning about this issue of whether, you know, OECD framework, responsible gold guidance, whether these auditing and these due diligence frameworks are too rigorous and too inflexible. And sort of question for you, Marcin. I mean, do you see that there's a could there be a lower tier of standard that is a stepping stone? Are the progressive standards that maybe could be used as well?
Well, I think actually the craft code dialogue was an attempt to kind of identify a consensus, but at the end, I think what you need is for the decision makers to kind of accept this interpretation. So, for example, the legitimacy issue, we've actually made an effort of trying to analyze, well, what is legitimacy, what it means, and how do you interpret it in different conditions. So, let's say, in a place like England, you require someone to have a permit because the system is working, and you are mostly you are likely to be able to get the permit. In a place where you don't even have legal framework to have such a permit, or you may have it in theory, but it's basically not working. So we're talking also like for Burkina Faso, from like 800 sites, you have like 20 that have some kind of paperwork. So I think there you need to be a bit more empathic and try to reinterpret this reality. But in the end, who's going to put the seal of approval, that this is fine? So you can have this standard, but in the end, someone has to kind of take it on board and facilitate making these decisions. So if you take this standard, and if I make this interpretation as a refiner or as a downstream buyer, am I not going to be punished in the future for taking this risk?
So there's one issue that we touched upon, and we didn't really discuss much in the workshop this morning, and that's the question of mercury. That seems to be the one thing that, you mentioned that in ASM, people immediately walk away from it. There's the Minamata Convention. There's a lot of things where people see the environmental damage of that. So maybe this is a question to the whole panel, but I mean, do you see the solution to that being the outright banning of mercury, or do you see it being more a question of the responsible use of mercury?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, you take it.
The latter. I don't think there's no substitute for mercury. It's cheap, it's effective, and I mean, what have we done in 30 years up to the Minamata Convention? We haven't done anything to help miners reduce emissions of mercury at the source. If it's used responsibly, then you have very few emissions and you're fine. So I don't know. I really don't know what the fixation is on implementing these new technologies, which have very different markets, and you're trying to substitute these technologies, but you're not looking at who's involved in distributing mercury to the source and whose livelihoods depend on mercury outside of the miners. So
I'll go with Marcin and then you, Christophe.
I think that this is also another example maybe of overzealous interpretation, because the Minamata Convention actually, tells you to manage mercury responsibly, rather than have like a cold turkey, withdrawal of mercury, because basically it's not easy to have such a transition. It's possible sometimes, also depends on the deposit, it depends on local infrastructure and so on. But in some ways, it really be much more cost effective to really adapt. And we have examples, of countries that actually introduced the ban without much preparation. And what happens is what always happens in these situations. You have black market where mercury is basically growing tenfold in price. Yeah. It's being bought anyway. You have the mafia actually making profits on the mercury, and the miners, rather than doing it outside in controlled conditions, hide it away and burn it in houses so that they're not discovered. And so I think it's in theory things sometimes look great, but these are very long-term transitions, and they have to be managed responsibly.
I'm going to give the last word to Christophe, and then I think we'll wrap it up.
I know each country has its own challenges, and we cannot duplicate what we are doing in Peru right now everywhere. But in Peru, the way we are working, I'm very proud every time I can talk to the PIX employees and saying, okay, Q1, we imported 1 ton of gold coming from Veta Dorada, standardization, no mercury. So thanks to that, we offer the way of, we save 3 tons of mercury. Because for
every
each,
year?
for 1 ton.
1 ton.
For so each time we are processing 1 ton in our process plant, we are saving 3 tons for the environment.
Okay.
And this is a KPI, by the way, we're using at Précinox. Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe just to end my personal perception, we are all aiming for the same things.
Yeah.
We want this to be, I mean, we want to change something. And when we have our customers coming to La Chaux-de-Fonds, they are telling us, you know, we don't understand all these different labels. What we want is ASM gold coming from sustainable supply chain.
Yeah.
Can you help us to bring something more simple? And maybe cross-recognition can be something we can work out.
Between what?
Between all the labels.
Right, right.
All the labels, because they want something simple. They want to engage with ASM. They doesn't want to engage with SBGA or PX Impact.
Yeah,
They want ASM.
Yeah.
They want to make an impact on the different countries. And they need our help to make this more simple for them.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you to all of you for this, and I feel very bad cutting the conversation short. Maybe I think we'll just wrap it up if there's, there's Ruth.
I was just going to say first, I know Gavin needs to dash, so if you wanted to jump off stage, no one will be offended. But I did see that there were questions for me, and there were other questions we didn't answer. We will come back, but the simple answer is LBMA is prepared to do a lot more. We just need to hear from you. But I think with that, can I ask you to join me and thank our panel in the usual way?
Thank you.